Speaking of a lot of money, I've got some personal news, which is political news, that I have suspected for many months now, but I wanted to make sure that I had all the facts I could possibly gather, because this is pretty explosive as far as I'm concerned. I appear, your favorite podcast host, appears to have been debanked by Stripe. Stripe is the largest payment processor by number of merchants in the United States. So this is no minor service, this is a major service. And the way I found out about this was, at this point, 8-9 months ago, I noticed that there was a glitch in the payments that I get from X. So X pays people for tweets, and it's not a lot of money, but you get these little payments every month. And I noticed they stopped coming through. So I didn't pay much attention to it. Again, it's not a ton of money, but I looked into it and there was some glitch, and then I don't know, clicked a button or two, fixed it. Then in January, it happened again. And I reached out to Stripe and X, and I said, hey, what happened? My payments for my tweets stopped coming through. And Stripe was immediately very, very cagey about it. And they said, well, you have to reach out to X because your Stripe account only works with X. And this is a crucial part to the story, to figuring out why I've been deplatformed, debanked from this payment service. Because I have all sorts of business interests, different companies, all sorts of stuff, books. This service is only tied to X. And when I reached out to Stripe, they said, oh, you got to talk to X. I said, okay, I reach out to X, but X doesn't really get back to me very much. They said, no, you got to talk to Stripe. And they said, no. Stripe says you got to talk to X. We sent them a notice back in October about an issue. And so if you want to hear, I said, well, you have the email. Just tell me what the email is. They said, no, we're not going to tell you, but you got to talk to X. So it was this game of ping pong back and forth for months and months and months. I have the receipts for it, of course. And lo and behold, I finally hear from X that the issue is on Stripe's end, and they sent me a link to reasons that Stripe might suspend your account. And I'm looking through, and it's all sort of stuff, gun running, illicit drugs, whatever. I said, okay, none of this is checking out. And then I saw this little portion. It said, businesses that engage in, encourage, promote, or celebrate unlawful violence toward any group based on race, religion, disability, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, or any other immutable characteristic. Now, the right gets accused of this all the time. If you think that a man can't be a woman, you're accused of committing an act of violence against some community that ontologically doesn't even really exist. Because this account, it's actually a pretty good case study for this, because the account only pertains to my use of X, which is a speech platform, a platform to express opinions, not to run guns or something like that. Because of that, it would seem quite likely, though the payment server won't be forthright about this, it would seem quite likely that I was debanked for my political opinions. I suppose political opinions, it could have been my religious opinions. There's been a ton of anti-Catholic persecution in recent years. The Biden administration sending jackbooted thugs to spy on churches, calling Catholics extremists and radicals. So it could have been that. I don't know why. Could it be one opinion that I've expressed that caught a lot of flack was and defamation from major news outlets was when I said that the ideology of transgenderism has to be eradicated from public life? Was it that? I don't know. I'm only speculating. But if I say men can't become women or something like that, it's just stating a basic fact of anthropology, a fact of the Christian faith, I don't know what it is. But what I do know is this story doesn't only pertain to me. Stripe, the fact that they're being so cagey about it suggests to me they just don't want to admit what is a big political liability. But I know that the Republicans are back in town. I know that the Republicans now control the entire government. I know that debanking is a major political issue. For goodness sake, Stripe, this payment processor, debanked the Trump campaign back in 2021. So this wouldn't be the first time that a conservative or Christian or any other politically incorrect group were debanked based on their views. But I know that there are a lot of Republicans back in Washington, D.C., whose job it is to look into issues like this. And so if I were Stripe, I would be cagey about this too. But this would appear to be a very unjust act that could involve, potentially, millions and millions of Americans. If you are a conservative, if you're a Christian, if you're just a normal person, who holds normal political views that everyone agreed on until 5 minutes ago, you are at risk of being debanked by the largest payment processor by number of merchants in the entire country. And until we get an answer from them, maybe it was just a mistake. Everyone likes to, it's just a whoopsie daisy. Until we get an answer from them, I don't see how we can conclude otherwise. And the very fact that I've waited now, not just 6, really more like 8 or 9 months, doing everything I could to get an answer on this, I don't think they can accuse us of being hasty or rash. And I think that maybe some people in Washington, D.C. are going to have a look into that, because this is a big, big political problem. If normal people are being debanked for having normal views, that's a very urgent problem that should probably rise to the attention of the people whose job it is to look into it. You have to go to hillsdale.edu/Knowles. This is unconstitutional. You ever hear that phrase? It gets tossed around like confetti at a political rally. You hear it pretty much anywhere people gather to debate the issues of the day. But here's the thing. When someone drops that phrase, do you just nod along and take their word for it? Or have you ever actually cracked open the Constitution yourself to see what all the fuss is about? That is why I am thrilled about Hillsdale College's brand new free online course called The Federalist. You know those Federalist papers everyone references but few have actually read? Penned by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, to explain how our Constitution creates a government strong enough to protect our rights, yet safe enough to trust with power. I remember when I was an undergraduate, I got to meet Scalia, and Scalia said, "How many of you have read The Federalist?" And 3 hands went up or something. He said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. This is your country. You're supposed to be the creme de la creme." Well, Hillsdale has got you covered. Hillsdale, one of the premier institutions of higher learning in the country right now. Head on over, hillsdale.edu/Knowles to enroll, no cost, easy to get started. Hillsdale.edu/Knowles, Knowles, to enroll for free. Hillsdale.edu/Knowles. Speaking of financial problems, this is really crazy. This is much more troubling than my being debanked by Stripe. 1 in 3 DINKS go into debt for their pets. What's a DINK? A DINK is a person who is dual income, no kids. You think of the typical coastal, urban, millennial couple. They're not ready to have kids. They might not even get married, but they have their fur babies or something. Really crazy story out of USA Today. There was let me see exactly. I have so many crazy stories today. Here we are. Okay. So according to a new Insurify survey, 68% of DINK pet parents say that they've made financial sacrifices to cover essentials for their furry friends. That includes, I kid you not, taking a second job, stopping savings contributions, so no longer saving any money, and skipping medical care for themselves to pay for their dogs and cats. DINK couples who were surveyed spent an average of $1,906 per year on pets, which is a lot cheaper than raising a kid. According to Raising a Kid, or according to reports of actual parents, it's about $23,000 a year to raise a kid. So $2,000 is a steal. But again, you're getting a dog, not a kid. The people surveyed said they would spend up to $5,004 for life-saving treatment and up to $2,835 per year to care for a pet's chronic health condition. It's a lot of scratch. 34% said they worked extra hours or took a second job to cover costs, and 33% said they took on credit card or loan debt to pay for their dog. 29% stopped contributing to savings, 24% delayed paying other bills, 15% stopped personal medical care. Okay. Now, why? Why do they do this? According to the survey, 39% of these people plan to have children someday. So it's 39% at least aren't planning on remaining childless forever and investing all their money in their dogs. 17%, however, said raising kids is too expensive ever to have them. 17% of people who go into debt for their chihuahua say that kids are too expensive and they're not going to have them. 15% said they never want kids, period. And why? Well, 29% say they prefer a lifestyle that allows more freedom. You're free if you go into debt to pay for your poodle, but you're not free if you have a beautiful child who you can raise, who will still grow and flourish and might take care of you someday. 22% said they need to improve their financial situation before having kids. There are many people who feel that way, and I totally get it. But only 5% of these people cited medical or fertility issues as the reason they don't have kids. So it's easy to look at these people and say, look, they can't have kids, they're suffering infertility. The cat or the dog is the second best thing. Why be so harsh on them? Because virtually none of them are dinks for that reason. Only 5%. 95% are dinks and potentially going into debt for their chihuahuas, not because they're infertile, not because they really want to have kids but can't. What is this about? You'd have to be out of your freaking mind to go into debt for your wiener dog. Why are they doing it? Because they have a good impulse, and the good impulse is to sacrifice for a creature that they love. The problem is the impulse has been fundamentally disordered by our decadent culture. Some people seem to think this is really nice and evidence of altruism if you're willing to go into debt for your poodle. Not true. Fur babies, the whole fur baby phenomenon, people referring to their pets as children, referring to themselves as parents when they own a dog or a cat, that is not evidence of altruism. That is a fundamentally selfish phenomenon. And you see it a little bit in the numbers here where they say, it's too expensive to have kids. I want to have freedom. I want to be able to go to brunch and go on European vacations, and that's too hard with kids. Fur babies are a selfish phenomenon. Having children is a selfless phenomenon. Having children, not only is having children selfless in the sense that you have to sacrifice a lot for your kids, having children is selfless in the sense that it is patriotic. It is your civic duty. If you need to close your eyes and think of America, okay, when you're in the process of making a child, because it is your duty to have a country that has children that can perpetuate into the future. It's also wonderful on a personal level and a sublime experience and enriching in every way. But it is also conducive to the common good. You can't have a country if people don't have kids. And a lot of people aren't having kids right now, and they're replacing kids and their natural desires for kids with little chihuahuas that they push around in strollers and they take a second job for. That is selfish. Fur babies are entirely indulgent, self-indulgent, because it gives you a little bit of the feeling of having a kid, a little fraction of an iota. But if you don't have kids, then you don't realize. It gives you a little fraction of an iota of the feeling of having a kid with none of the responsibility. If the dog gets run over by a car, you're going to have a bad weekend, but then you'll be fine. You'll move on. None of the responsibility and none of the payoff. They don't really do anything. People love their dogs. People love their cats. It's kind of nice. They make your household a little more lively, but they don't really do anything beyond that. Having children does something. Having children echoes throughout the ages and the generations, makes a country strong. This is a big problem. Not everyone gets to have kids. 5% of these people suffer infertility, and that's a terribly painful thing, and I get it, and they should have their dogs, and they should love their dogs. The 95% who are choosing puppies over kids are screwed up in the head, and they need to go to therapy, and they should probably go to confession, and they need to get their life in order, and then they need to go into the boudoir, and they need to close their eyes and think of England. They need to close their eyes and think of America, and they need to have kids, and they're going to have a better life for it. That was a great clip. Now stop, ring the bell, subscribe. See you next time.